Good evening. My name is Chase Thomas. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Council with the Alliance for a Better Utah and its sister organization, the ABU Education Fund. The ABU Education Fund is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization dedicated to civic engagement and good governance. As in the past, we see the political season as an opportunity to work toward increasing civic engagement, and we are doing so through a series of forums and debates. Our forum series that we're doing, aside from these debates, is called the LDS Values Forums, and they're designed to bring together both Democrats and Republicans of the LDS faith to have an open and frank discussion about how their religious beliefs and interpretations of their church's doctrines influences their political choices and affiliation. It has proved to be a vibrant discussion of the intersection of faith and politics, two topics so often avoided in polite conversation. We'll host our next LDS Values Forum at UVU on November 3rd, and we ask you to please consider joining us. In contrast to the Debates Commission's focus on congressional and statewide offices, our debate series is designed to engage the public in their local elections, to provide local candidates with an opportunity that they often don't get, and to give voters a chance to interact with those politicians who, quite frankly, will have the greatest impact on their day-to-day lives. This year, we are sponsoring 3 legislative debates in addition to the school board debate that we had last week, and this is the final debate in that series. As in the past, we are pleased to partner with the John R. Park Debate Society of the University of Utah for this debate series. The John R. Park Debate Society was founded in 1869. It has hosted more than 30 campaign debates and issue forums over the last decade. It was recognized as a 2016 University of Utah Beacon of Excellence and ranked in the top 10 nationally and first in the Pac-12 by the National Parliamentary Debate Association. The director of the Debate Society, tonight's debate moderator, is Michael Middleton. In addition to being the Debate Society's director, Michael is assistant professor of argumentation and public discourse in the Department of Communication at the University of Utah and has over 20 years of experience in competitive debate and argumentation pedagogy. I'd like to welcome all of you tonight to thank our candidates, Bruce Cutler and Christine Passey, to thank our Debate Society partner, and to thank our broadcast partner, public radio station KCPW, who will be recording tonight's debate for broadcast next week. I also want to add a second sincere thanks to all of you for coming out this evening. We know that it's tough to give up your evening, but this matters. It's one thing to watch Hillary and Trump beat each other up on national television, but this is democracy in action. This is what creates an engaged citizenry. We welcome you to stay after the debate for a half-hour meet and greet with the candidates and encourage you to join the ABU Education Fund's mailing list by signing up tonight over there or visiting our website at abuedfund.org. With that, I would like to turn things over to Michael.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Michael Middleton, and I'm the director of the John R. Park Debate Society at the University of Utah. I'll be your moderator for tonight's debate and look forward to facilitating a conversation between the 2 candidates with us tonight who are running for a seat in the Utah House of Representatives representing District 44. We'll welcome them in just a moment, but first I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce the format of tonight's debate. Before I do, though, we should take a moment to thank Rachel Sanders and Josh Cantor, who couldn't be here, as well as Chase and Madison from the ABU Education Fund, an affiliate organization of Alliance for a Better Utah, aimed at improving voter education and encouraging voter participation for organizing this evening's debate. So thanks to the ABU Education Fund. Tonight's debate will be organized in 3 parts. After we get done welcoming the candidates, we'll start with introductions from each. Those will be 3 minutes in length. After that, we'll turn our time to a moderated discussion where I'll be posing the questions, and for each of those questions, both candidates will answer. They'll have 2 minutes for their initial answer, and then I reserve the right to ask one or both of them a 1-minute follow-up question. The issues the candidates will be discussing tonight are drawn from topics they suggested to the Debate Society, but the members of the UU's John R. Park Debate Society wrote the final questions, and neither candidate has had the opportunity to preview those questions. Once our question period's over, each candidate will have 3 minutes to offer closing remarks, and the order of introductions, questions, and closing statements has been predetermined by a coin flip, and there will be a timekeeper here in the front row of the audience who will give you time signals from 30 seconds down during each of these parts of the debate. So before the debate begins, I do have one request of the audience, and that's please join me in turning off your cell phones, pagers, tablets, or any other devices that might interfere with tonight's conversation or otherwise interfere with the recording. And with that, I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming the 2 candidates running for House District 44, Democrat Christine Passey, and Republican Bruce Cutler. As promised, we'll begin with 3-minute introductions from each of the candidates, and by virtue of the coin toss, Ms. Passey will begin with her introduction.
First, I want to again thank everyone for this opportunity. It's really nice to come together and really talk through the issues. We very rarely get this kind of opportunity. Second, I'd like to ask your forgiveness for any coughing or sniffing. I am getting over both the flu and bronchitis, so I'm here, but you might hear me cough. So a little bit about me. My background is in social work and nonprofit management. I have had the opportunity to work in many fields with social work, and my last job within the nonprofit field was as the director of Friday's Kids Respite, which provided respite care to families of children with special needs. These families had no other option for care. Since then, I have had the opportunity, and right now, I'm the coordinator for disability rights for Salt Lake City. It is an absolute dream job for me. Every day, I work on policies and ways to make Salt Lake City and Utah better for people with access needs and disabilities. Talk a little bit about me. I have 2 beautiful daughters. My 5-year-old is named Felicity. My favorite story about Felicity is we told her one day that we thought she should run for president. So she ran around the room, and then she came and she said, "I want a present." We're like, that's not exactly what we meant. And then I have my beautiful 8-year-old, Skylin, and she is the reason that I got involved in politics to begin with. She is severely affected by autism and is absolutely my inspiration. When she was 2, insurance companies, and she was just diagnosed, I received a denial for a well child visit as well as her diagnosis. When I called the insurance company about it, they said there was no help for my kid. No help for a kid with autism, so we won't cover anything. So I got together with hundreds of parents across the entire state of Utah, and we went to the Capitol, and we took on the insurance lobby, which is one of the biggest lobbies and strongest lobbies in the state. After 4 years of hard work, we won, and a insurance coverage for kids with autism passed, helping tens of thousands of children. That is what inspired me to get involved. Everyday people, I was just a mom mad that my insurance company told me that they couldn't help my kid. Everyday people are the ones that took down the insurance lobby. That is my inspiration. I'm an everyday mom. I got involved for my kid. I didn't get involved. I didn't expect to come to this place in politics. But what I knew is that was able to change. It was able to change lives, and I really cared about it. So that's my inspiration, to make a difference as an everyday mom.
Mr. Cutler.
Thank you. I want to first of all thank the ABU Education Fund for sponsoring this event, and the University of Utah Debate Society under Dr. Middleton for moderating this debate. I also want to thank Christine for participating here as well. I'm Bruce Cutler, and I'm running for re-election to the Utah House of Representatives for District 44, which I assume most of you are in, which is Murray, Midvale, and I always see a little bit of Sandy. I've been privileged to serve as your representative for the past 2 years. It's been a challenging and rewarding opportunity to do so. And I've attempted to represent all of my constituents, not just those that voted for me. I'm a longtime resident of this area. My wife and I moved here in 1977 when our oldest daughter was only 1 year old. So we've been here a long time. My wife, Kathy, who's seated on the front row here, we've been married now for 42 years. And grateful to have her. And I have 4 wonderful daughters, 2 of whom are here today. April, who is in Vail, Arizona, and I assume she may be listening in on Facebook. And then I have another daughter, Emily, who is in Georgia, and I assume she's listening in as well from her location. They've all attended, all 4 of our daughters, April, Melissa, Liz, and Emily in Murray School District. They've all gone to Grant Elementary. They all went to Riverview Junior High School and Murray High School, and they've all graduated from college. They now have married 4 fine, wonderful sons-in-law that we consider our sons, and they're very good husbands and fathers. and they blessed us with 16 grandchildren, which we very much enjoy. In addition to our daughters being caring wives and mothers, they're also involved in other activities. My oldest daughter, April, has just gotten her teaching degree in Arizona, and she's now going and teaching school in the junior high school in Midvale, Arizona. Next daughter, Melissa, is teaching piano lessons out of her home, which takes her quite a bit of time. Liz, who is also here with us, she's an exercise instructor and a volunteer. And then Emily, our youngest, busy mother of 4 very young and active children. As you can tell, my family is the most important part to me. And I'm so grateful to have their support, and especially my wonderful wife's support. Otherwise, I couldn't do this, and I appreciate them. I'm a graduate of the University of Utah in computer science. And after a career of 35 years in that field, I've retired. And I'm now part-time at the same company, working as a STEM education coordinator. I served for 8 years on the Murray Library Board and 6 years on the Murray School District Board, and 6 years on the Murray Library Board, 3 years as the president. Again, I'm running for re-election here, and I've been privileged to serve and would like to continue to do so. And this is about you, and who your best representative is, not necessarily about me. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your introductions. Our conversation tonight will range across a variety of topics. And the first that we're going to address is education, a topic I think both of the candidates suggested in their list of topics they sent to the Debate Society. And Mr. Cutler will take the first answer for this question that will get us going. According to Deseret News on September 28, 2016, a new report from Envision Utah finds that Utah's teacher shortage is the #1 education-related concern for residents, with almost 80% of respondents expressing concern that schools are unable to find enough teachers for their students. Furthermore, the Utah State Office of Education reports that 42% of new teachers quit within 5 years. If, in your case, re-elected, how would you work to reverse this trend and encourage teachers to stay in our public education system? Mr.
Thank
Cutler.
you. Thank you. That is a very good question and a very pressing issue. I know that the state board has put into place one step that I can see why we did it, and that is to allow those who have an education or have a career in a particular subject to start teaching without having to have a teaching degree. And I think they did that more out of desperation than anything else. And so I think that's one thing the state school board has done. I think a lot of businesses in Utah, because business in Utah is going very well and the unemployment rate is very low, it's not just public education that's suffering from a need for more employees. Many companies are suffering the same thing. So what we need to do is to continue to encourage individuals in Utah to get that college degree and to go into public education or go into STEM-related careers. But the challenge is we just don't have enough people going to college to sufficiently staff all of the positions we need. Now I know that Mark Levitt, who is the principal at Hillcrest High School, has tried a unique approach, particularly to fill some teaching positions where they can't find a teacher that's got the training. What he's done is he's put a part-time instructor in that class who understands the material, in this case computer science. And the teacher is studying to gain that certificate to be able to learn that particular topic. So now the teacher is in the class and the part-time teacher is teaching the subject. So first of all, we've got somebody in the class that can teach the subject. The teacher is learning the material so that next year she or he can come back and continue to teach, knowing the pedagogy, knowing how to manage the classroom, and now also gaining that experience. So that and getting more people into college, and we'll talk about the intergenerational poverty and getting more of those kids into college as well. So that would be my solution. Is it's a Utah issue, which is a good thing, low unemployment, but it's also a bad thing.
Ms. Passey.
So teacher shortage is a very complex topic, and I want to kind of talk about two parts of it. One is that we are not retaining our teachers. I am endorsed by the American Federation of Teachers, the Utah Education Association, and the Canyons Education Association. While I've sat down with these teachers and asked them, how are you feeling? What can we do? One thing they told me is they don't feel respected. They don't feel respected because the program that Representative Cutler was actually talking about makes them feel that they're very undervalued. This program takes away requirements for the it takes away education requirements and really, really lowers the bar. What this does is it tells our teachers that have spent all this hard time and work that what they've been doing was a waste of their time. That the time they took to become a professional educator, to learn how to approach teachers or students, to learn how to manage classes from 5-year-olds like my daughter to 12-year-olds. All of these things are extremely important because these are applicable to teachers constantly. We need to make sure they feel respected, and the answer is to not bring in lower quality teachers. Then the second issue is recruiting new teachers. Teacher pay is a major problem. It is the number one reason we are hearing that people will not they will not become a teacher, is because we have one of the lowest rates for the salaries of teachers between all of this in all of the states. So we're not being able to recruit people because we're not paying them well. And I think both of those, we need to respect our teachers and we need to pay for their expertise.
Thank you. You brought up the question of teacher pay, and so I'd like to ask a follow-up question of Mr. Cutler. The most recent data from the National Education Association ranks Utah 45th in teacher pay. Our state average of $46,042 is over $11,000 less than the national average. How do you respond to the criticism about teacher compensation that has been raised in the local press and by your candidate or your opponent as well?
I would say that it's true. You know, we are a state who has a lot of children, and we have not as many taxpayers because we have large families, and so it's a challenge in order to get enough pay to do that. Now, I will say this, that I have voted in each of the sessions I've been in to increase the WPU value. The WPU value is basically what goes toward the schools to pay the teacher salaries. And so I have voted to increase that more than we actually ended up increasing it. But I'm in favor of increasing that salary and working on that. You know, there may even be a potential, because I saw this when I was on the school board, that as we did a couple of years ago, we actually increased taxes in order to provide $75 million for equalization. So the question is, are the taxpayers really willing to pay more in income tax or property tax to raise the salaries? That's what it boils down to. Are we willing to do that? The other part is getting the economy to grow such that we get more people into the state paying salaries and paying income taxes.
Thank you. Ms. Passey, would you like to follow up on the issue of teacher pay?
Absolutely. So teacher pay is huge. That's why we're not recruiting teachers, as we just talked about. We need to think out of the box. One of the ways we can do that is modernize the tax we put on big oil and gas producers. That's called severance tax. What severance tax is about is taxing the companies that are taking oil and gas out of our lands. Utah's lands, they're taking the resources out of our lands, and they are profiting off of that. So they pay us a severance tax. Our rate, oh wow, it's a minute, I forgot about this. Our rate is, if we modernized our rate to the surrounding oil producing states, we could bring in an average of $40 million into our schools. That is an increase in the WPU of 1.4%, and that could go entirely to teacher salaries, and that does not increase the tax burden on everyday Utahns.
Thank you both. Before we move on to another topic, one additional question on education. The Utah State Office of Education reports that over the last year, Utah schools performed as well as in the previous year, or perhaps even a bit better when it came to dropout rates. However, those same reports note that there's a very clear distinction in Utah schools between students who attend urban schools or students who are in affluent school districts versus economically disadvantaged students in rural areas, and English learners. And so this question, I suppose, is while you would be elected from an urban district and a relatively affluent district, if elected to the state legislature, what sorts of policies might you try to pursue to try to close the achievement gap between more affluent schools and less affluent schools or rural schools in the state? And Ms. Passey, you go first on this question.
I think that a lot of that goes back into severance tax. Severance tax is an across-the-board tax that can be applied to these rural communities as well as the minority communities around our state. I think we do need to make sure that we really are paying for each one of these places. Now, I do want to speak to the dropout rates that you were talking about. Right now, we have we're calling it a school to prison pipeline with how many dropouts we're having, or how many people are coming from school straight into prison. One of the things we could fund, and we should fund, is in South Salt Lake they have an innovative program where they're bringing together Westminster, the schools, and the United Way. And what they're doing is they're coming in and they're helping the student. But what's innovative about it is they're creating family centers. In these family centers, they're teaching the parents English as a second language. They're teaching the parents interviewing skills. They're teaching them computer skills. And what they're finding is by stabilizing the parents and creating resources for the parents is stabilize the child. They're having amazing success with this and their dropout rates. We really need to look at this kind of an innovative solution as we're trying to really lower our dropout rates.
Mr. Cutler.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to address this severance tax. Our current education budget in the state is $4.23 billion. The severance tax would bring in an additional $40 million. Now, a problem with that, first of all, severance tax only goes into the general fund. Severance tax does not go to public education, so we would have to change the codification as how severance tax would be used. Severance tax cannot be used for education as it currently exists. Income tax and property tax are the primary revenue generators for public education. So while we may need to increase the severance tax, and I don't disagree with that, we can't use that money without doing some significant changes to the law and the code in order to use that. And plus, it's only $40 million out of a $4 billion budget. We need a lot more than $40 million to really make an impact. As far as the achievement gap and as far as the dropout rates, one of the things that I'm currently working on, and a bill which I just opened actually today, is to allow Utah Educational Savings Plan for children, and particularly those who are in poverty, to be purchased, first of all, by a foundation board and to be set aside for children. The Intergenerational Poverty Commission has proven that through other states where they put aside even a small amount of money for a child, even $200, when they're in junior high school, say, this is set aside for you. When you're ready to go to college, this is going to help you go to college. And so setting aside a very small amount of money for a child motivates them to go to college, whether they live in a rural or whether they live in an urban area. It's the same thing. In our area, in Midvale, we have a lot of poverty. We have a lot of second language learners. So Midvale and Murray have a lot of challenges. But I think that's one way. And I think what Christine is mentioning is certainly can be another one. I don't disagree. I think we need to look at all of the options out there of what we can do to get these kids to go on to post-high school and college if they want to, but at least some post-high school.
All right, thank you both. We'll now turn our attention to a healthcare-related question specifically focused on Medicaid in Utah. The Utah legislature successfully passed HB 437, which was House Majority Leader Jim Dunnigan's proposal to expand Medicaid coverage for around 16,000 people. But that legislation has been criticized for cutting out many low-income Utahns who would be eligible under federal guidelines. So the question then is, do you believe this criticism is appropriate? Why or why not? And if elected or re-elected, how would you ensure that Utah ensures access to health care for all of its low-income citizens? Mr. Cutler.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to mention that because of so many of my constituents writing me and contacting me the first year I was up there, I did vote for Healthy Utah. Now, I was voting more with the minority party than I was with my own majority party. But because there were so many people that said we need to pass Healthy Utah, I did vote for that. It did fail, but I did vote for it. Then there was another plan that same year proposed by Representative Dunnigan, which was a PSP. Can't remember the name now. But it was another plan that was at least getting us into it, getting something. That also was rejected. This past year, Representative Dunnigan, I think, did a marvelous job of at least getting something. And I say something is better than nothing. And while he may receive criticism for doing something, I will not criticize him for doing something because it's a step. We need to take steps, particularly in this Medicaid area. Some of these Medicaid programs have been implemented in states and is starting to actually bankrupt those states because it has just exceeded the expectations of how much it costs beyond all expectations. And that's the way medical expenses are. They just get out of control. And so we need to do this in Utah. We must balance our budget. And if we don't do that, we'll have to find other resources to pay for Medicaid expansion. Well, where does that come from? Half of our state budget goes to education. So if we get into Medicaid and we can't afford it, guess where the money's going to come from? Education. We don't want to do that. So we need to do this in a very balanced way. We need to work across the aisle. And I appreciate Brian King, the minority leader, is here, and I think he's got some great ideas, as well as Representative Dunnigan, who's the majority leader. And so I think we need to continue to work on this. We've got some strong conservative values in this state. We need to maintain those, but we also need to take care of our people.
Ms. Passey.
Okay, first I'm going to talk severance tax because it's very important to me. It's something I will be working on. $40 billion is not a small amount to the education. It's 1.4 increase in the WPU. It's a big deal. It's a big amount. And I'm sure if the legislature finds it important, we could direct that directly to education. I'm very passionate about that issue because we need more innovative ways to fund education. Now, to Medicaid, I absolutely think their criticism is warranted. We have all for years been sending taxes to Washington to cover people with Medicaid expansion. 280,000 people is how much we have been sending taxes for to cover. This bill that passed supposedly would have covered 16,000 people. Well, now we're finding out that it's covering 7,000 people. This isn't like I can't see this as saying we did something. I think this is a cop-out. I think it's a cop-out to say we did something. 280,000 people is a lot of people. We have Utahns, families that don't have health care. They don't have any way of taking care of well child visits. I mean, very simple things that we take for granted with health care, they don't have. So, I am dedicated to working on Medicaid expansion. I'm really excited to work on it with Senator Shiazawa, who is the senator from the majority of this district. I've already worked with him on bipartisan healthcare legislation that was extremely difficult, the autism insurance bill. I'm excited to work with him. He's a Republican, and he is planning to work on the Medicaid expansion, and I will work with him, and I'm fully in support of it.
All right, thank you both. The next topic that we'll address is Utah's public lands. H.R. 5780, the Utah Public Lands Initiative Act, designates specified federal lands as components of the National Wilderness Preservation System in Utah, establishes national conservation areas and watershed management areas, adds specified lands to Arches National Park, and establishes the Jurassic National Monument, affecting over 18 million acres of public lands in eastern Utah. However, critics argue the bill would, quote, downgrade protections for wilderness quality lands in the region, create new oil and gas drilling zones that are exempted from environmental protections, and hand over large areas of national public lands to private and state control. What is your stance on this piece of legislation? And more broadly, what would guide your decision-making aimed at balancing the preservation and use of Utah's public lands? Ms. Passey.
So I do not support at all H.R. 5780, I believe is what it is. One of the big reasons I don't support it is it cut out stakeholders that are involved in the land that they are cutting apart, or they're moving to different interests. They didn't include Native Americans. They didn't include ranchers. They didn't include outdoor recreation people. These are a lot of people that have a stake in the land that they're working with. And as they're parceling out this land, it looks like there's going to be an opportunity for special interests to really jump in and take some of our beautiful Utah lands. I am also against what the legislature passed last year that will be a response if H.R. 5780 goes into effect, and that's the Utah Public Lands Management Act. It does not adequately protect our lands. And again, I think it's an opportunity for a giveaway to developers. The other thing is I'm extremely concerned that as we are looking at all these changes, that we are going to affect our outdoor recreation. Our recreation is huge. It's a huge industry, our tourism and outdoor recreation. Right now it's bringing in $5.8 billion into the economy, and it's creating 65,000 jobs. We cannot hurt this. We need to protect our beautiful lands. I want it to be there for me to continue to enjoy and for my future generations to continue to enjoy. Both these pieces of legislation do not protect the lands well enough. They didn't bring in the stakeholders, and I am very concerned that the lands will be given over to special interests and developers.
Mr. Cutler.
You know, there was a program in place for a number of years, well, ever since statehood, called the Trust Lands Fund, that up until about 1983 was bringing in about $18 million. Now, this was managing all of our school trust lands. Back in 1983, they made some changes to that and says, you know, we need to start bringing in some more revenue for our schools. And we got all of these lands, and these are the purpose of them was to provide for education. So they made some significant changes back in about 1994. They brought it up to $95 million because they're managing those lands better. They're selling them when appropriate. They're protecting them when necessary, but they're bringing in appropriate revenue. Now they've increased that fund to over $2 billion. So from $18 million to now $2 billion. And where's that money going? That's all going into education. So I look at these public lands, and we're going to reach a disagreement on this one, that I believe the public lands need to be given back to the control of the state. Those of us who live in this state care about our lands, but we also know that we've got resource needs such as education, where we need to fund our education. We talk about coming up with new ideas. And we passed a bill this last time, which is just a resolution, that said that we'd take those, if we ever get those public lands back, we use them to fund our public education, because those will be new dollars, new revenue coming into the state of Utah, if managed appropriately. And we've seen that this can be done very well, and can bring in from $18 million to $2 billion. And that's just in the fund. And on the ballot, you'll see this month, or this week, you have an option on there to change the Constitution to make sure we don't spend more than 4% of that $18 billion, so that we maintain that for future generations. That's the kind of advanced thinking, that's kind of investment knowledge we need for our public lands and for others, so that we can take care of our own needs here in the state.
Thank you. The next topic we'll address is transparency in government, and Mr. Cutler will take the first answer on this question. In 2015, the Center for Public Integrity gave Utah a grade of C- for public access to information. Do you think that Utah's public transparency is a current issue that needs to be addressed? Or more broadly, what steps do you think could be taken to give Utahns more faith in their government?
One of the things that I do as a legislator, and if you're not on my email list to receive it, I publish monthly a newsletter to all of my constituents to let them know what's going on in the legislature. I publish this each month to say, here's what I did in the legislative session the last month. Here's the issues that are coming up. I've also established an education advisory committee. That education advisory committee is composed of many of you who are sitting in this room. It's composed of parents, teachers, administrators. We've got homeschoolers, we've got charter schoolers. And so I believe in getting out there and making sure that people know what I'm doing. I can't speak for the rest of the state, but that is very important to me in communicating with my constituents. I have an email list of about 1,600 emails that I send that out to. And I've received numerous comments that they appreciate the transparency that I have exhibited to make sure that my constituents, at least those that want to know what is going on. Now, can we do better? Absolutely, we can always do better. But if we consider the number of hours on legislation that we pass and committee meetings on the Hill, they are available online, so you can listen to each of those committee meetings. They're recorded, so you can listen to them later if you don't get it. All of our sessions on the House floor are broadcast video as well as audio. Anyone can attend at any time. And so I believe that we're doing a lot. I mean, this last year, we had over about 1,100 hours of public testimony and public conversation that's going on in the Hill. So I can only speak for myself, and I can speak for what I see up there. Now, are there conversations that are private? Absolutely. We're going to have private conversations. That happens. That's the way business is run. But decisions are always made in public. We need to continue to do that. We're doing that. We need to continue to do it. And perhaps we need to get more legislators to do what I'm doing to make sure that the information is out to their constituents.
Ms. Passey.
So this is something I'm actually really disappointed with Representative Cutler, because he is also my representative. I'm going to read something that he wrote in the Deseret News. It was published in the Deseret News on January 17th. He said, in 2015, Utah House members spent 1,111 hours discussing, debating bills and issues, including caucus meetings with 1,097 hours and 39 minutes open to the public and press. Some may say that we can do better, and perhaps we should. Now, that is 13 hours and 15 minutes. That is closed time. Now, that's a lot of time to have closed caucuses. But what's most important about those caucuses is what are we talking about? And one of those closed caucus was about Medicaid. It was about Medicaid expansion. They went behind closed doors, and their expansion failed, and Representative Hughes, the Speaker of the House, came out and said, we're not bringing it to the entire floor. Well, when this happened, KUTV called all of the legislators and asked them what their vote was. Well, Representative Cutler was one of 4 people that would not tell KUTV what his vote was. After a lot of political pressure, after a lot of people talked to him, 2 days later, he brought it onto Facebook. I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think that's even remotely acceptable to say, maybe we should do better. Nothing should be behind closed doors. Everyone should know the votes. They should be disclosed immediately after they are taken. I guarantee you will know my votes when they happen, and I will vote on issues in open meetings.
Mr. Cutler, would you like the opportunity to respond?
Yes, I would. First of all, one of those 2 meetings I was not at. I was out of town. But as far as my vote, it was a misunderstanding that I had because I've dealt a lot in confidential meetings. I believe in confidentiality. When we're doing something in private, I keep that private. And I thought, okay, this was all done in private. We shouldn't be telling other people about it. And then the speaker comes out and says, okay, everybody can say what they want. I said, well, that's nice to know. I thought we were supposed to keep it quiet. So once I realized that, I says, oh, I didn't need to keep that quiet. So immediately I says, okay, here's how I voted. Okay, so that was a misunderstanding of what I thought we were supposed to keep confidential. I believe when somebody tells me something in confidence, I keep it in confidence until they tell me otherwise. And that's exactly what happened there.
Thank you. Our next question will address the topic of bipartisanship. Fox 13 on January 29th of this year discussed the collaboration of Democratic and Republican lawmakers in the Utah legislature on a series of bills offering funding and resources to combat the opioid epidemic. How will you, if elected or re-elected, work across the aisle to promote the needs of your constituents? Ms. Passey.
So I've already worked on really difficult legislation across the aisle. By every standard, passing an insurance mandate is extremely difficult. There is no way you can do that without Republicans. In fact, the majority of the votes have to be Republicans. I know I'm a Democrat. I'm not going to pretend that I can do anything by myself. I have to work with Republicans, and I have experience doing it on extremely difficult legislation. It is important. This district is a flip district, which means it is many Republicans as Democrats. To be a good representative of this district means to represent both Republicans and Democrats and work with both Republicans and Democrats on issues.
Mr. Cutler.
There's some things we don't disagree on, and this is one we're not going to disagree on, because the opioid epidemic is in fact an epidemic. The number of people that are caught in the illness, and I'll say illness of addiction, is not driven by Republican or Democrat. It is a serious concern. My wife and I served for a while in the Salt Lake County Jail there, and we'd see these women go out, they'd come right back again because they were caught in this cycle of addiction. Opioids is certainly one of those serious medications that catches people and will not let them go. And that's, again, why we need to give some treatment with the new Justice Reinvestment Program that reclassifies who goes to jail and who doesn't. That these are the kind on first offenses, they're not taken to jail, just as some of the, as you saw recently where they went in Salt Lake City and they took some of these people off the road, says you can either go to treatment or you can go to jail. Well, we need to get them into treatment. We need to get them into treatment earlier. The earlier we get them into treatment, and not into jail, outside of the jail, keep them out of the jails, and get them the treatment we need. So I don't think we're going to find, most bills in the state legislature pass unanimously. You often think that, well, every bill has a discussion, but the majority of bills that come to the floor of the House are passed almost unanimously. And these are the kinds of bills that I don't think we're going to find a lot of disagreement from either side of the aisle, because we're all trying to help those that have these opioid addictions. So that would be my thought. And certainly, we're going to reach across. This is a common problem we've got in the state of Utah and nationally that we all need to look at figuring out how to solve.
Excellent. As a follow-up question for both of you, since, as Ms. Passey pointed out, you're in a relatively evenly divided district, why should an undecided voter or someone of the opposite party vote for you instead of your opponent? Ms. Passey.
I think first, I care very much fiscally on what we are spending our money. I think there's some problems in where our money is going and that it's not going to the places that really are our priorities. I think that I believe in transparency. You will always know what my vote is when I vote. I've also worked constantly with people across the aisle. I am a moderate, and that's why I'm able to get things done across the aisle. So people could definitely have good representation from me with that. Now, as far as what I'm working with on other Democrats, I'm excited to work with Senator Shiazawa on his Medicaid expansion bill.
Mr. Cutler.
Yes, thank you. I think the main issue there is who will best represent you, and certainly you've got some differences here between my opponent and myself. My goal there is, again, and I've already mentioned this, I've got this newsletter, I'm contacting people, I've walked the entire district and talked to an awful lot of people during the campaign, and I think that's very important to do, and keeping that door open. One of the things that I do receive compliments on is the fact that I'm willing to listen to all sides of an issue. And that's why I received the endorsement of the AFL-CIO and the operating engineers, both of whom endorsed my opponent last time around, is because they came to me and says, you will listen, and we appreciate the fact that you'll listen. Now, we don't always agree, but you will listen, and I will listen to my constituents. One of the things I do try very hard is to answer every email and respond to every voicemail. Matter of fact, during the session, I fell behind and had to tell my intern, who is here today, to go answer some of my voicemails and emails and say he did listen, but he can't respond right now.
Thank you. The next topic we'll address is religious liberty. In January of this year, The Atlantic asked, can states protect LGBT rights without compromising religious freedom? And indeed, religious liberty has become a contentious national issue. But NPR of June 1st argues that Utah's anti-discrimination legislation, which found compromise between the LDS Church and the LGBT rights groups in Utah and Salt Lake, could serve as a model for other states. So the question then, is further legislation needed to protect religious liberty in our state? And if so, what might that look like? Mr. Cutler.
Thank you. I was on the Judiciary Committee when these bills both came to our committee, both the anti-discrimination and the religious liberty. And it was a beautiful experience, because as I sat there and listened to the anti-discrimination, it says, okay, we don't want to discriminate against the LGBT community or anyone else for that matter. Discrimination is not something we as Americans should be doing. We've done enough of that in the history of this country, whether it's the blacks, whether it's the Mormons, whether it's any other religious groups, or whether it's the LGBT community. We need to make sure that no one is discriminated against because of how they believe, how they look, how they act. We just need to be equal to all. But along the same lines is I should, as a religious person, be able to express my religious beliefs and say, okay, I like you as a person, but I may not disagree with what you do. I may not agree with you with how you behave, but that's your choice. But I can express those opinions publicly, and I can do so in the workplace. There have been individuals prior to this legislation being passed, this religious liberty, whose employers discriminated against them and says, you can't talk about that at work. You can't bring that up at work. You can't bring that up in the public square because that's a religious point of view. That's something that I specifically said. So can I say that I don't necessarily agree with the way that you're living, but I grant you the right to do it because you will grant me the same right to believe how I want to believe. And I think that is working very well. Many other states are trying to do what the state of Utah did. I was proud to be part of that. I was proud to stand on the stand behind the governor and Lieutenant Governor and others, when they signed both pieces of legislation, they were critical to both factions and both groups of individuals and both cohorts. And I think we need to let them be and see how well they can do.
Ms. Passey.
I think religious liberties is a definitely an interesting topic. I think that there are a lot of one-off experiences where someone can say, this person didn't let me say something on my side, or this person didn't let me say something on my side. But that is not the majority of the conversations that we are having. The Utah Compromise was absolutely a model in bringing together the LDS and other faith organizations, as well as the LGBT community, together for a compromise. It was absolutely a model of what should be done. And what I trust is that the legislature will, again, if there are perceived threats to religious liberties, they will come together, bring all stakeholders together, and come with legislation that could, again, be a model to the state. Now, I want to speak specifically to each legislator. There's been people that say there are Utah legislators who are not against, but they're violating religious liberties. So I just want to say that Article 1 and Section 4 of the Utah Constitution and the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution both protect religious liberties. All legislators, they make an oath that they will stand by this. Oh, sorry, I'm getting shaky. It's a sick thing. They make an oath that they will stand by this. And I think that when we look at all of our legislation that comes out of this, that we're finding that nobody is violating this and it's always being upheld.
Thank you both. The next topic addresses representativeness in government. There have been several reports this fall that the Utah legislature will likely revisit SB 54 in the upcoming session. SB 54 was the legislature's response to the Count My Vote initiative. And of course, the Count My Vote initiative supporters have indicated that the actions of the legislature will be significant in determining their next steps. So with that in mind, the question is, do you think that Utah's electoral system adequately represents the voice of the citizens of Utah, or do you think that there are additional steps that can and should be taken in the next legislative session? Ms. Passey.
Our system absolutely does not adequately give voters a choice in who they're voting for. As far as the legislation, I think there needs to be a lot of a conversation about that. But the way it works right now is people go to their caucus meetings. Now, the majority of people in the neighborhood do not go to this. And at the caucus meeting, they vote for people to represent them. So we are now 2 steps away from the individual voters. We have the ones that actually go to caucus meetings, and then we have the ones that were voted to represent. Those caucus members, those members of the caucus, they are the ones that then decide, they vote and decide who is going to be the representative, the candidate from that community. In the majority of our districts, they are decided. Is it a Republican that's going to win, or it's a Democrat that's going to win? Removing the process that every voter gets to decide who is moving on to the primary basically removes voters' ability to choose who is representing them in those districts. It is being decided by caucus members, and it's never going before everyday people. This is not okay. We cannot continue this system because legislative districts, there's no options for voters to really engage in them.
Mr. Cutler.
Yes. SB 54 is problematic. I went both routes. I went the signature gathering route and also went through the caucus route. Now, I will say that I did it differently than any of the other legislators because I did mine with all volunteers, and some of those volunteers are here today, and they helped me collect signatures. I didn't pay for a single signature, and it was a heck of a lot of work because I had to collect 1,000 signatures in my district, even though I have a lot fewer Republicans than others in other districts who have many more than I do. But we did it, and we got them collected, and I did them with every one of them being volunteers, which thank you to all of those of you who helped me collect signatures. But it was so much work, I don't know that I'd ever do it again. Because I think going through the caucus, this last time, we had over 1,000 people, maybe 1,200 people come to our caucus. That's the kind of turnout we need to have every time. Now, is a caucus perfect? No. I think that there's some challenges with it. I think that we need to open them up so that people can come to the caucus or at least view the caucus and participate, for instance, online. If we had our caucuses available, being broadcast online, we need the challenge is getting the proper credentials of people to be able to access that video, but it would allow people to dial into those caucuses, whether they're in town or not, to be able to participate. So I think improving the caucuses. Now, keep in mind, we are not a democracy. We are a republic, and we're a representative government. We have people representing us all the time, whether it be at the caucus level, whether it be at the state house. I am your representative of the state house. You've got a senator in the state house as well. You've got national representatives. We are not in a democracy. Everybody doesn't have to vote on every issue. So we do elect, and we need to make sure that everyone gets that chance to elect their representatives through the caucus system. Is it perfect? No. Can it be improved? Yes.
Thank you both. Our next question will address poverty in Utah. A September report by the Intergenerational Welfare Reform Commission, led by Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, found that across the last 5 years, Utah's rate of childhood poverty is declining. However, there are still enough Utah children caught in the cycle of intergenerational poverty to fill over 1,600 school buses. The study also revealed that 1/3 of children may end up living in poverty as adults. What do you believe are the next steps to continue this decrease in child poverty? Mr. Cutler.
Thank you. And I've attended those meetings of the Intergenerational Poverty Commission. I've gone to every one of those meetings, and I've read their reports. Unfortunately, I haven't read the entire report that came out just a few weeks ago, but I did read a portion of it just today. One bill, and I mentioned this previously, that I've opened as of today, one of the recommendations that they came back with is, again, these educational savings plans for children to help them have that goal of going to college. That's one step. That's only one method. One of the other things that we're working on is I'm also participate with the Midvale community working on their homeless shelter. So I meet monthly with the homeless shelter project, which is headed up by Mayor Seguini in Midvale, as well as other participants, looking at that homeless shelter and how can we get more of the people into low-income housing. And also, how do we get these kids to receive early childhood education? The best way to do that education is in the home, but if they don't do it, then we as a society need to make sure that we offer free or no cost, low cost, I should say, pre-K education. Because I'm hearing that, in going over to Copperview Elementary, talked to one of the kindergarten teachers, says, these kids come into kindergarten, they don't even know how to hold a pencil. They don't even know how to have a conversation, because all they do is they come home and they sit in front of the TV and they don't learn how to even have a conversation. So some of the parents need to be taught how to do things, and if the parents aren't doing it, then we need to help those children get up to speed so that by the time they're into kindergarten, they're ready for kindergarten. And so I did support the pre-K bill that came out this past year. I don't think it got funded like we wanted it to, but we did pass it. And that was, again, across the aisle. That was one where both the Republican and Democrats said, we got to do something for these children. So, again, reading those reports, and I'm going to look at what they recommend, and we need to start implementing some of the recommendations of the Intergenerational Poverty Commission.
Ms. Passey.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything he said. I really want to hit on, when we look at early education, my daughter was part of the early education program that begins before 3. It's a really important program, and most people don't know it exists. If we really tackle these delays before they hit 3, it makes a huge difference. We need to be really advertising or letting family know that this program exists. Then let's talk about, as the children are getting older, or even the younger ones, if they don't have health care, if they don't have Medicaid coverage, if the kids aren't enrolled in CHIP, then that is a huge problem every day in their lives. If we can't give them health care coverage to take care of their needs, which include, again, well child visits or the shots they're required to take to go into the next level of education or school, these are extremely important things. Now, as we talk about these children growing up and saying, there's a lot of people that they are continuing to poverty when they're adults. How many of those is because of a healthcare need? How many of those is because of a mental health care need or a disability? I would say probably quite a bit. When you look at poverty rates, there are a lot of people with mental health problems and a lot of people with disabilities. We really need somebody advocating for those individuals. That's what I do. I have the best job in the world. I advocate for individuals with disabilities. I'm working on right now some innovative approaches on employing more people with disabilities. They're really exciting. They're in research right now. We're partnering with some schools, and we're really excited. These are things that I work on and I really care about. Is one, we need to get children health care. Two, we need to make sure that families know about the early education program. And three, we need to definitely employ people later.
Thank you both. We've arrived at concluding remarks for tonight's debate, and Ms. Passey, you will begin.
Well, again, thank you for this opportunity. I lost by 53 votes last year, or in 2014. We worked really hard, and it was an amazing experience. Since that point, I haven't stopped working. I haven't stopped talking to people and listening to people, and it's been a really exciting experience. What I found is, again, I'm a mom that was just upset and got involved. I never expected to be at this place. And the impact being an everyday person has in my conversations is pretty amazing. People are surprised in a way that I'm so approachable, that we can so quickly gain a relationship. And I think that that type of dialogue and back and forth is extremely important. I am passionate. I'm excited. I was brought into this by inspiration of what everyday people do, and I want to bring that to the Capitol, bring my passion and my experience to really work hard for our district and ensure that the legislation that passed benefits not only our district, but the entire state.
Mr. Cutler.
Thank you. First of all, I lost by 156, then won by 153. So I've been on both sides of the issue as well. So it was an interesting election. But it's been a privilege for me to serve you in the legislature. Many people have asked me, what were the most surprised you when you went up and started serving in the legislature? And I'll say there's two things that surprised me. Number one, how much work this job entails. In addition to the 12 to 16-hour days that are required of us during the session, which is a 45-day period, there are numerous meetings going on all year long. Then with the campaign on top of that, signature gathering, whatever, it's literally almost a full-time job. And I'm certainly not doing it for the pay, because we don't get paid enough. But I do it because I want to serve, and that's why I'm doing it. That's another reason why I retired from my job, so I could give more attention to this legislative job. I have the time now to give full attention to this job. I've also found how dedicated most of the members of the legislature are. I come to realize from both sides of the aisle, people are up there for the right reason. They're trying to do what they believe is right. Now, do we all agree? No, and that's a good thing. We shouldn't all agree. But they all try to do a great job. They try to do what they think is the best thing for the state of Utah. And it's for that reason that I'm running again for the Utah State Legislature. Again, while I say we don't all agree on all issues, I think it's important that we work together. So I really have three top priorities for the legislature, and maybe four if I'm elected and Christine is in her position. I'd like to work with her on the disability issues that she mentioned. I'd like to strengthen our public education system. We've talked about that. With me sitting on all of the education committees, I am in a prime position to have that happen. And there may be a very good chance that I might be appointed as an assistant chair in one of those committees. Don't know that that's going to happen, but I will be there. And I want to improve the teacher morale. Christine brought up that. I think that's a big issue. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by reducing some of the state mandated testing. And I want to increase funding for education as best we can. And I want to take education into the future with ideas such as competency-based education, where it's not just measured on how long you sit in your seat, but how well do you know the material. We need to strengthen the Utah economy, especially in the high-tech industry, and get more employees that can fill the jobs that are coming to Utah. We sit right next here to the new Coliseum from Overstock.com. Thousands of employees, another building right next to that. We have right here in Midvale jobs that are going wanting. We need to make sure we fill those. And then working on intergenerational poverty. And that's, again, we're gonna doing that together. There's not going to be my side to your side. But I would love to have your vote again so that I can represent you, and I will do my very best to fulfill that role if you elect me again. Thank you.
Thank you both. That concludes tonight's debate. Please join me once again in thanking both Mr. Cutler and Ms. Passey, the candidates vying to represent District 44 in the Utah State House. Likewise, join me once more in thanking the team from the ABU Education Fund for organizing tonight's debate. It's the shared belief of the ABU Education Fund and the John R. Park Debate Society that open public dialogue and debate is the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. In an era when voter participation is often at all-time lows, it's essential that each of us remembers the importance of active participation in our local, statewide, and national governments. We hope that you will begin that engagement with us tonight by sticking around to participate in a meet and greet with these two candidates. And of greatest importance, be sure to vote. To aid you in this effort, voter registration materials are available as you exit the auditorium. It's easy, it's painless, and it's the most important thing you can do as a member of your community. Thank you, and good night.